I got the mic. I'm not gonna be talking too much, but I'll have it here just for the laughs. For the memes.
overboard. And all you Trump fans, boy, he fucked you, didn't he, huh? Hey, you like me? Hey, me! Hey, you know who I am? I'm a daddy's boy. Yeah! Yeah! I got all the money from my daddy, and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put up a wall. You vote for me, I'm going to put up a wall. Liar. I'm going to fix the infrastructure. Liar. I'm going to give tax breaks to the very rich. Hey, you kept your word. That's right. According to the Tax Policy Center, 82% of the tax breaks went to the 1%. Trump, you lying bastard. Look what's going on with the people flooding over the border. You want them to come in? Let's have a vote. You want them to come in? Yes, I want them to come in. I'll pay extra money out of my taxes to pay for them. No, I don't want to pay extra taxes. Stop them from coming in. You can't stop them from coming in? I forgot. You couldn't even win the Afghan war. You lost the Iraq war. You can't even protect your borders. America, what a fucking joke. Run by fucking freaks. We had that fucking Cuomo, trying to fuck chicks. Yeah, it's a fucking freak show right in front of your fucking eyes. Oh, watch your language, Salenti. We're the masses. We love to get fucked right up the ass. But you got to be careful now. You got to watch out. Listen to the Oregon health authorities to tell you what to do. They got it down perfectly. Look at them. Look at this. Look at the fucking cartoon. It's the global cartoon of the new age, the new abnormal. This is Gerald Salenti. That's some of today's trends in the news. And again, I'm fighting for freedom. And please subscribe to the Trends Journal if you want. Oh, no, don't. Go to CNN. No, listen to Fox. I know, I like ABC. How about NPR? How about go fuck yourself? How can you be so fucking stupid to listen to that shit? There's no magazine in the world like we're putting out. And we need your help. The more subscribers we have, the more we do. I hold rallies, I hold protests, I go to them, I'm fighting for freedom. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they're endowed by their Creator with the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence. And that's what I'm fighting for. Independence. Look at these little jerks that are telling us what to do. Happiness. Could you imagine a Declaration of Independence with happiness? They don't know happiness. They're such tight asses, man. That's what we're fighting for, independence. So join the fight. OccupyPeace.com. OccupyPeace.com. And thank you all, by the way. Money's coming in, and we're going to be using it to do more. And thank you all for the subscribers that are coming in. We're doing great. Oh, again, watch the video yesterday of me and Judge Napolitano. We're going to do another one next week. And go to the Rich Dad, Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki. It's a great one. And George Gammon, a whole bunch of great interviews out there. And I thank them all for having me on. And thanks for tuning in. The COVID-19 war has changed the world. But who's prepared? What's next? It's in your Trends Journal. Trends Journal subscribers are prepared. Subscribe to the Trends Journal. Read history before it happens. From the world leader in trend forecasting.
This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news, and if there's any bad news, there's a lot of it. But anyway, I have a fantastic program. One of my very, very favorite persons. I remember years and years and years ago reading a little green book of his, and it opened my eyes. I went, oh my God, he's thinking exactly, definition of intelligence. If you think like me, you're intelligent. And I said, that was the first time I came across Congressman Ron Paul. And ever since then, I've been following him. And we're very excited because there's so much of what he's been saying has come true. Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to this interview. And thank you, Dr. Ron Paul, for being here. You are I love this word, a self-described constitutionalist. I'm going to adopt that because people say, are you Republican or Democrat? I'm like, I'm pro-Constitution. I'm pro-free markets. I'm pro-liberty and freedoms. So I am still looking forward to hearing you today and what you see, what we can do, and we will take your lead. So
very good.
Here.
So take off there, Dr. Paul.
What's happening and what do you see and what in the world is going on in this crazy world right now?
Because everything you've been saying is coming true.
All coming true.
Well, I don't know whether you can say that or not, but I hope not. I don't want that to be true because I worry about what we're leading to. But then again, I try to point out, the bad things that are happening, and I try to get a philosophic point that goes wrong, and then it causes the bad problem. But it's something that I've worked on for a long time. I think it's very, very important, and I just think that things are going badly. But in spite of the fact that things are very bad, and we do our program every day, and we talk about all the problems, but almost every day we try to find something that is beneficial. So I was always amazed when I was doing the presidential campaigns. Of course, people asked me, what did you like most about the presidential campaign and that you did? And it was going to the university and talking to thousands of kids who really were willing to keep their minds open and would listen to me. And not a few, but several times people would come up to me afterwards, and they would be excited about it. And they say, you know what I like about you, Congressman Paul? You're such an optimist. And then I got to thinking, well, if I talk for an hour, 45 minutes at least, we'll be telling them, you're young people, you're inheriting a mess. The monetary system's gone to the dogs. We're going to have perpetual wars. We don't follow the Constitution. Your civil liberties are challenged. And I thought, well, why are they calling me an optimist? And I finally figured it out. First, they want to hear the truth. And I've decided that if they hear it, instead of just hearing lies, everything is fine, and then they don't believe it, the whole thing goes to pot. So what I did by telling them that, and then I did make a precise, a deliberate purpose to try to tell them what solves the problems. People say, well, what are you going to do now? I said, well, we could, it is a big problem, but we could first start off by obeying the Constitution. That's not too complicated, so I would go into the benefits of a free society. And of course, that's why my program is called Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. And I truly believe it. And that was one thing that people were convinced of, because one individual came up to me after a debate, and I was talking about the Constitution. We ought to just follow it. We shouldn't go to war without a declaration. And the young man came up and he said, what, and he was complimenting me on this. I said, yeah, but so-and-so, right after he talked about, the Constitution, why we should obey the Constitution. I said, why are you telling me that? What about so-and-so? He said the same thing, didn't he? He said, yeah, he might have said it, but we didn't believe a word he was saying. So I think people are looking for an honest answer, and we are dedicated on the Ron Paul Liberty Report to do precisely that, fully realizing that we don't know all the answers, but also saying, well, that's why you want freedom. You want freedom of choice. You want voluntarism. This whole thing on COVID, just think of people who know so much, the scientists, boy, they're the ones who are really the enemy, the ones who have declared that they are the scientists, and you have to listen to the scientists. And of course, if they're doing it for political propaganda and monetary gain, then they become very evil. So it's something that I think is very important. I remember the first time I ran for Congress, way back. It was a consequence of the Bretton Woods breaking down on August 15th of 1971. I'd been into reading this Austrian economics in the 60s, and it was predicted by the Austrians, the Bretton Woods can't last. Matter of fact, Henry Hazlitt said from 1944 on, it can't last. And of course, there was this collapse in 71, and so it was something that was very important to me and had a large impact on my speaking out.
So let me ask you really specifically here, because the book was called "End the Fed," and I think most people do not know this, but Marx was the person who said if you want to destroy capitalism, you need a central bank, and the Fed is a third central bank America's had. And you also said this is that the way we finance our wars is through a central bank. And as we just have Afghanistan, and you and I are old enough to remember 1975 when they had the CIA helicopters on top of the roof of the embassy in Saigon, and then now we have Bagram Air Force Base shut down, and $860 billion of weapons are now transferred to the enemies of Israel. And I'm sitting there going, how can they do this? How can they do this? And so that's what, if we could get into the Fed, why did you want to end the Fed? Because, of course, it's not federal, it's not a bank, and it's not U.S. So why did you want to end the Fed?
It has no reserves.
No reserves.
Well, the main thing and the big picture is I believe that big government wouldn't thrive if it didn't have the Fed, because it's a taxing authority, and it's also an authority to control people and grow government. And I've decided that the time I spent in Washington, I came to realize, well, we don't have a big problem. We only have two groups that are giving us trouble: conservatives and liberals. And they each have a reason for spending money, because and I argue the case, and every day I think it comes about this way, is that the big issues, it's very bipartisan. People say, what do you mean? The Republicans hate Nancy Pelosi. Yes, personalities and power struggles, there's a lot of antagonism. But if it's support for the Fed, if it's support for deficits, of spending, if it's support for the war, it's always bipartisan. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. So it wouldn't happen without the Fed. The Fed is the instigator. It's the taxing authority. Of course, it creates all the financial problems, the business cycle, and everything is related to the Fed. So we lived for a good while just with attempts at those first and second attempts at the bank. But basically, we relied with some respect with gold, up until the 20th century. But it's something that we have accepted. But it's the powers, the military-industrial complex. It's the people who want the welfare state. Everybody has to have a safety net. Before I went to Congress, I was convinced, those people who won't work, they get on food stamps and they want housing allowances, all that. And they do, and there's a bunch, and it's big. But I changed my mind on where the real culprits are. And it is in the corporate state. It's this crony capitalism that they have. And this pretense, they're the ones who get all the big money. Who gets bailed out? The little guy really doesn't get bailed out. A lot of times they lose their house and their jobs when there's a downturn. But the others, they don't ever stop and think, why does that happen? So the welfare state is incestuous. It's in there, and that's the person we have to attack.
I want to ask your opinion, because you're the one who said that the Fed can finance these wars. And so what we had, like I said, you and I are old enough to remember 1975, the CIA helicopter on top of because I was a Marine pilot in Vietnam. That was a very painful issue to me. Okay, so when you saw this thing happen in Afghanistan, they give a whole base of background, and they give $860 billion worth of equipment to Russia and China for technological gains, and they arm the enemies of Israel.
Yo, Baron, so
What
right.
did you think?
So right, man.
That's
Sorry,
what I
don't
want to
wanna watch
know.
Ron Paul.
I think what
It's
most
just the
people-
autoplay. Shit, that happened 10 minutes ago? Sorry, dudes. Yo, what's up, Aaron? What's up, Dick? Thanks, dudes. Maybe he has time too? Yo, the Orion Belt alignment. Yeah, man. Right near the Taurid meteor stream, right? Because I think the Orion is not, I think it's, yeah, I think one of the eyes is part of the Taurus, I think. If I remember, I might be wrong. Or it's near the Taurus constellation, which is why they selected Orion's belt, and is very symbolic of like their passage into. Like,
This is the
afterlife.
Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello, Robert
Tower, man.
Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news,
Yo,
and
we
if
called
there's
Dick
any
on the
bad
board.
news, there's a lot of it. But
Oh,
anyway, I
yeah,
have a
we need to
fantastic
meet somebody,
program,
somebody
one of the
watching
favorite,
the 90s.
one of my very, very favorite persons. I remember years and years and years ago reading a little green book of his, and it opened my
In a shifting world order where superpowers don't lead as they once did, does Canada know what it wants or how to get it? From trouble with China and Afghanistan to being left out of a new security pact, If the world was headed down an uncertain path before COVID-19, amidst 4 years of a very unconventional U.S. president, the arrival of a pandemic amplified that. And only now are we starting to get a sense of the global implications. Adam Tooze is a professor of history at Columbia University. His latest book is an important contribution to this subject. It's called Shutdown: How COVID Shook the World's Economy. And he joins us now from the Upper West Side of Manhattan Island in New York, New York. Professor Tooze, great to have you on TVO again. How are you doing?
Good to be here.
Are the outlines, in your judgment, of how the pandemic was handled by different countries all over the world clear enough now that we can begin to form some confident judgments about who got it right and who got it wrong?
It may be premature for that because we are not done with this pandemic at this point. But we can certainly form a view, I think, of the general reaction to the crisis. And unfortunately, it's not a positive one. I mean, you have to look long and hard to find any country at this point that feels satisfied with the way in which it reacted and handled the crisis. You might single out perhaps South Korea or New Zealand. But on average, I think, taken as a whole, the lesson that we all have to draw is a humbling one, is that even though we could understand that a crisis like this might be on its way, when it came to the crunch, when things got real early in 2020, the reaction was just not of the promptness and the urgency and the seriousness that would have been necessary to avoid the catastrophe of March and April 2020.
Do you think there are reliable conclusions we can come to yet about how the pandemic was handled, let's say, by the United States versus Europe versus China?
Well, I think at this point it's evident that in terms of containing the epidemic, dealing with it in its first stages, the Chinese won the race. They beat everyone else to imposing shutdowns, controlling the pandemic, containing it within one city and one province. Obviously, they're also responsible for having failed to recognize the seriousness of the situation at the end of 2019. And they therefore found themselves in this situation of having to adopt emergency measures. But then faced with it, having identified with it, they are really the only truly large government that reacted rapidly and at the right scale. Between the Europeans and the United States, I think you'd have to say it's a bit of a toss-up. It's hard to call. There have been stages when it felt as though Europe was reacting in a more concerted way, or at least parts of Europe. Germany for a while, Eastern Europe for a while, whilst, of course, in the UK, in Spain, Italy, even at the very beginnings of this crisis, things were going very badly. And the United States, similarly, has been on a bit of a roller coaster, in the sense that the original stage was a disaster on the East Coast. Then there was, as it were, the further disaster of the winter of 2020, 2021. But then the relative success of the vaccine rollout followed now by another wave in the southern states. So it's been a patchwork epidemic, I think, wherever it's hit. But neither the US nor Europe really has any reason for satisfaction at the outcome here.
Well, you mentioned Germany. Let me follow up on that. They're well-known industriousness. Did that get them through it better than others?
What seems to have helped is decentralized health management in the early stages, but then it turned out that their health administration system is incredibly creaky. I mean, the scandal of the German epidemic is that the entire system appears to rely on fax machines. And when it came to, as it were, the survivability of German society, the viability of sustaining prolonged social distancing, and above all, school closures, German society showed profound vulnerability. This is a highly advanced, one of the richest countries in Europe, which simply does not have adequate digital infrastructure. They made critical decisions 5 or 6 years ago to stick with copper wires for their telecommunication system, and this has served them very poorly in an age of 5G. So even the Germans have discovered and have, as it were, been forced to face through the pandemic a serious reckoning with the inadequacy of their own infrastructure.
Let's talk about economic after effects. I guess what's made the past year and a half so extraordinary in world history is that governments all over the world they made a decision to put their economies into deep sleep in some respects. And we faced economic meltdowns, the likes of which, may have been unprecedented in the way it happened. How much worse, though, do you think the economic crisis could have been?
it could truly have been apocalyptic, I think. The pace of the downturn, the pace of the contraction of economic activity in March and April of 2020 is simply without parallel in the recorded economic history of the world. We have never seen that kind of contraction before. By the second week of April 2020, we estimate that global GDP had contracted by 20% in a matter of weeks. So that's Great Depression style contractions, not over a period of years, but literally in a matter of days and weeks. 3.3 billion people worldwide, that's about 90% of the global workforce, were under one or other type of constriction, limitation, social distancing regulation, or just outright furlough. The education of our young people collectively worldwide came to a standstill. So the long-term damage from that will be grievous, but it could have been even worse if there hadn't been the huge central bank and fiscal policy taxing and spending measures put in place across the world, not just in the rich countries, but in many middle-income emerging markets as well.
Well, let me follow up on that. What, in your view, were the single most important initiatives undertaken to have made the catastrophe you just described more manageable?
Well, the one which, as it were, we could not have survived through to April or May without was the spectacular intervention by the American Federal Reserve in the market for US Treasuries. This is really the piggy bank of the global financial system, and it was not working in March. Not only were prices and interest rates moving in really perverse directions, prices were going down, interest rates were going up, but you couldn't transact, you couldn't sell portfolios, you couldn't sell holdings of treasuries into the US market. And that is a disaster for the global financial system. If that had been allowed to continue, we wouldn't really have gotten through to April or May without major bank failures and other types of financial meltdown. But beyond that, what mattered most clearly for the vast majority of people was the ability of societies, both rich and middle income, to sustain people during the shutdown, to enable them, as it were, to have a degree of life support whilst ordinary business, ordinary work was interrupted. And in Europe, we saw various types of short-time working system adopted in Australia, I believe in Canada as well, on a model that the Germans had pioneered in 2008-9, which saved people from the huge insecurity of immediate unemployment, which is what folks suffered in the United States. They, in turn, were helped by the rapid emergency improvised rollout of a kind of ramshackle unemployment insurance system. So those were the sorts of measures which by the summer mattered most for most people worldwide.
It's always a bit dangerous for historians to say, as a result of all this, it has ushered in the end of ... But it does raise the question, given the big government response, regardless of whether governments were Democratic, Republican, liberal, conservative, has it hastened, in your view, an end to the thinking that neoliberalism can solve all our problems?
I think certainly it's ended that kind of thinking. The question of whether it really will end the practice is another matter. I think neoliberalism as a body of coherent economic doctrine is dead. And this is really, as it were, the stake in the undead body of neoliberalism in that respect. I think it's difficult to see it coming back. The fact of the matter is, though, that the vast majority of these massive interventions that were mounted last year were really there to underwrite society as we know it. And that society itself has, of course, been shaped by the impact of now basically half a century of policies that were orientated towards small government and the market. The structures of inequality, the patterns of who owns what where, and which minorities benefit most from this sort of measure, those were all reinforced, replicated, in a sense continued. And that's really one of the sort of ironic legacies of 2020, is that these gigantic policy measures were adopted really to keep everything in place. It's a sort of extraordinary conservatism that things should remain the same. Everything at that moment had to change. And in that respect, I think continuity is the name of the game here.
Were there any governments around the world, in your view, that used a neoliberal approach to fighting the pandemic, laissez-faire, hands-off, more market approach, not using the central bank the way you just described, and who had success with it?
Well, the two countries that really stand out, and it's a bit of a puzzle really, are Mexico and India. I mean, we did find ourselves in the situation in 2020 in which Mexico, a supposedly left-wing administration in Mexico City, was taking lessons from the IMF on the need to increase its fiscal response. And I think the result in Mexico is quite clear. We saw a surge of poverty there. alleviated above all by the spillover effects from the American stimulus. So Mexico is famously, too far from God and too close to the United States. And in this particular instance, it benefited to a degree from that stimulus. Remittances to Mexico surged. India initially saw virtually no response. And as a result, 2020 became a catastrophe for the poorest Indians, of which there are hundreds of millions. So much so that by the beginning of 2021, the Modi administration had to change tack. But they really are the outliers. This was a crisis which, across most of the world, as it were, solicited a clear understanding that really government had to help, the state had to intervene here.
Let me pluck a quote out of your book in which you describe this as an exceptional and transient crisis, no doubt, but also a way station on an ascending curve of radical change. What is that radical change that you see coming around the corner?
Well, I cleave to the view held, I think, by many epidemiologists and virologists that this is just the beginning of a surge of mutations of increasingly dangerous epidemic diseases that will be generated by our unbalanced relationship with nature. They've been predicting this sort of crisis for some time. We've had forerunners. We had the SARS experience. We had the swine flu moment. We had MERS. There's every reason to think that there's more and more dangerous things coming down the pike. And to that extent, 2020 is a sort of test run, an overture, a preface, if you like, to what may be a new era of challenges of a dimension that we've never faced before. In some ways, this is even more radical and more fast-moving than climate change, because potentially, rather than affecting a huge region like a giant hurricane does, or a drought, this potentially affects literally everybody on the planet.
A test run. The past year and a half, you think, could be a test run?
Absolutely. I think this is the sort of crisis that we need to understand the potential of, and understand that next time it could be even worse. And we're not done with this one yet. After all, the Delta variant is the result of this disease continuing to move through the global population. It continues to do that at an extremely elevated and dangerous rate. We do not have a program to fully and rapidly vaccinate all 7.8 billion of us. And as a result, we are basically riding our luck, even with this epidemic, let alone with pandemics to come. And this one is 1 or 2 mutations away from being a far more lethal disease than it is. But Bill Gates is absolutely right to say that this pandemic risk is the one that could actually claim the lives of 1 billion people on this planet in the future. If you look back to the 17th century, in that century, 1/3 of the world's population succumbed to a combination of climate change, in that case global cooling, and the pandemics that ripped through Eurasia and Latin America and North America in that period. So yes, this I think has to be seen as the harbinger, as a forerunner of a new era of comprehensive global crises.
Well, every time you mention Bill Gates or Anthony Fauci, there are a sizable number of people in the United States whose heads explode because they're convinced that this is something that those two gentlemen have orchestrated in order to enrich themselves, which simply gets me to a question about if this was a test run and this is about to become a more newish normal for us going forward, how in heaven's name do we work our way out of it when there are so many people who simply don't believe why it happened?
I agree that this has tested the limits of public rationality, you might say. It requires us to mobilize a strange combination of, as it were, scientific skepticism and commitment to rationalism on the one hand, and on the other, at critical moments, simply to trust the judgment of people who clearly know far better than we do. As in, for instance, Dr. Fauci, who may have changed his minds about face masks over the course of the crisis. But then, as John Maynard Keynes famously observed, what do you do when the data change? I change my mind. And it's navigating that terrain, which is a huge challenge for public discourse, for all of us involved in the making of public opinion, to convey the necessary combination of, as it were, skeptical commitment to the values of critical scientific inquiry, and on the other hand, at critical moments, a willingness to simply do as we're told, because that is the efficient and quick way to move through this crisis. I agree, however, that there are depressing conclusions to be drawn from the current moment. one upside, I think, is that there are very few things that are more effective in convincing people that vaccines are important and work than immediate exposure to a lethal infectious disease. We see far lower rates of vaccine skepticism in the populations of low-income countries and emerging markets who are clamoring for access to this vaccine than we do in some of the rich populations of the world. In any case, because this is an infectious disease and it works through contact, the crucial thing is to get 60 to 70% of the population safe behind a wall of immunity, and then to ramp up the capacities of our healthcare systems to deal with the fallout from our inability to reach everyone and to deal with the breakthrough infections that we're bound to have. It's about increasing our overall tolerance. It doesn't require total conformity by 100% of the population. It requires simply a critical mass to reach that level of immunity to put us all out of harm's way.
Understood. Let me pluck another excerpt from your book and raise a question emerging from that. The future challenge, you tell us, laid down by 2020 seems clear. Either we find ways to turn the billions invested in research and development and futuristic technologies into trillions. Either we take seriously the need to build more sustainable and resilient economies and societies and equip ourselves with the standing capacities necessary to meet fast-moving and unpredictable crises, or we will be overwhelmed by the blowback from our natural environment. I know you touched on this, but I think we need to be a little more specific about what you think that blowback looks like and when it might happen.
Well, it takes many different forms, and there are two which are top of stack right now. One is the climate crisis, which is ongoing. It's not something about the future. It's something that's already happening in large parts of the world, whether in the form of drought or extreme weather of other types. And the other one that we've so far encountered is pandemic disease. We will also in future be dealing with the wide and ramifying consequences of the loss of biodiversity. We are dealing in many parts of the world with desertification of essential agricultural land, which is crucial for the global food supply, especially as the world's population shifts and moves gradually up towards 10 billion, where we hope it will stabilize. And finally, we have to deal with the extraordinary and awesome implications of massive levels of pollution, the most dramatic element of this perhaps being the pollution with plastic of large parts of the world's oceans. All of these are, as it were, constantly produced by our own behavior. And given the obstacles to concerted collective action, given the extreme divisions within our politics, particularly in the West, it seems to me that science is our best hope. Science and technology are the silver bullet. We can't necessarily persuade everyone to take the vaccine, but we don't need to. We need to get 70% to do so. And in that case, the crucial thing to do is to seriously invest in the pipeline of innovation, of scientific solutions, of pharmaceuticals that will deliver us those solutions. We need to upgrade our ability to sequence genomes. We need to multiply the number of labs we have. We need to move from a situation where we're not certain that we can do coronavirus vaccines to a situation in which we're routinely developing them just in case, constantly mapping the range of viruses that are out there and building the kind of reserve capacity that we would need to produce vaccines at an adequate scale. And we're talking 8 billion doses of vaccine in a matter of months. We need not one serum institute in India, but we need 6 of them dotted around the low income and emerging market world so that they can all ramp up production simultaneously. Now that's investment and that costs money, but this is money well spent. This is what would be better, as it were, to build a world of labs, a world of research institutes and pharmaceutical production capacity. This is good stuff to be spending money on, and the estimates of the cost involved are not astronomical by the standards of modern financial markets. Hundreds of billions of dollars spread over a period and around the entire world will do the trick, and it would be money well spent.
Let me follow up on that and ask about money well spent, because well, I'll just put it in. These numbers will seem small to you as an American, but for Canadians, they are astonishing. I mean, our government's traditionally ran deficits of about $30 billion annually for several years until this past year when the government of Canada introduced a budget deficit of $345 billion, which was so astronomically off the charts of anything anybody could imagine. Our national debt is now north of $1 trillion. And I guess 2 things. Number one, are we ever going to be able to pay that money back?
Well, no, because the crucial thing is with public debt is you don't have to, because the Canadian nation, which effectively owes that money to itself, is infinitely lived. So this isn't like a household where you and I have a mortgage, and as you're getting on in life and you move into middle age, you suddenly begin to size up the timeline of that 30-year mortgage, and you realize, well, you need to get going on paying it down. A national debt is a community debt owed by a community which is infinitely lived. In the Canadian case, is continuously expanding through demographic growth and through immigration. And so that debt will be spread over time and over successive generations. And if what it's doing is paying for Canadian society to get through a historic shock like this so that life can continue and what's called the scarring in economy and society is not too grievous, so that people can maintain their homes and continue supporting their children and their children's education, then again, this is money well spent. This is a burden that will, as it were, ultimately be sustainable in terms of Canada's long-run economic growth. And in any case, is there any sign at all of stress? The sign of stress you would expect to see is that interest rates are nudging up as you borrow more. And the reverse is the case across the world, even though we have engaged in gigantic borrowing, because there has also been a huge surge in saving during the course of the epidemic and vast amounts of money that were unspent that needed to be put away. The debt has, in a sense, funded itself. There is very little sign to date of any stress in any of the major debt markets worldwide.
In which case, how important a question is it, do you feel, that needs to be answered, which goes something along the lines of, yes, we undertook an enormous amount of debt, and some of it was probably pointless spending, some of it was probably sloppy or bad, or who knows, even fraudulent spending. Is it important to understand the distinction amongst all of that?
It's worthwhile, of course, and a government which engages in large-scale spending should clearly be accountable. And it's profoundly regrettable if people take advantage of this kind of public largesse because it discredits it. But I find it very hard to believe that Canada will be unlike anywhere else in the sense that those kind of elements of the spending are trivial by comparison with the overall effect. And furthermore, if the aim of the game is to stimulate the economy and keep things going, unless the people engaged in this kind of devious behavior bury the money in their back garden, it in fact flows back into the national economy in any case. So though in the first case, it's clearly a regrettable misappropriation and misuse of the funds, it's A, small, and B, overall, it will nevertheless generate some degree of stimulus because the folks will spend it on groceries or a new television or on childcare or whatever. And in that case, the money flows back. Of course, though, any kind of public body which spends money on this scale must be accountable, and rigorous inquiries should be carried out and checks, and if necessary, sanctions imposed.
You always give us so much to think about, which is why I'm so grateful that you continue to take our calls and appear on our program. Adam Tooze, history professor. His latest is called Shut Down: How COVID Shook the World's Economy, and we're grateful that it's brought you to us from New York City today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Imagine being poised to reopen or ramp up after months of lockdowns, only to be short one essential part of your business: workers. It's not an uncommon story, and with us for their experience, we're joined in the nation's capital by Lindsay Osborne. She is marketing manager at Ridge Rock Brewing Company. And in Little Italy of the provincial capital, Rebecca Sutherland. She is the salon owner and colorist at Hair Artisans. And it's great to have both of you on TVO tonight.
Thank you.
I wonder if I could just get the two of you. Lindsay, let's start with you. Just tell me about your business.
Yeah, so I work for Ridge Rock Brewing Company. We're out in Carp, Ontario. It's half an hour from Ottawa's port. We've been open 3 weeks this weekend, actually. So it's great. The community really supports us a lot, but unfortunately, we're not open 7 days a week anymore fully. We are now open 5 days a week because we simply can't find staff to work in the kitchen, and it's very. I'm going to
follow up on that in a second. Yeah, Rebecca, how about your business? Where is it? How long you been open? How long you been there? All that stuff.
We've been open for actually 10 years this year. August was our 10-year anniversary. We're at Yonge and St. Clair in Toronto. And we also used to be open 7 days a week, and we're down to 6 days a week, and we're short-staffed 4 of those days.
Well, let's follow up on that since you've both mentioned it right away. Lindsay, when you say you're short-staffed or having trouble getting people, be specific. What do you mean?
Yeah, so I would say normally we have roughly 20 kitchen employees, whether it be full time and part time. Right now, we're down to basically a quarter of that. It's crazy. Basically, 2 days a week now, we have our brewery staff volunteering to help out and barbecue, just so we can actually keep food going out to the guests. A lot of our staff went back to college and university, but aside from that, like, we just can't. There's nobody applying. It's like that at every restaurant, I feel like, across the province. It's insane.
And Rebecca, how about in your world?
Similar, like in 2019, we employed anywhere from 7 to 9 people, and we currently employ 3 people. We lost people during the pandemic a variety of ways, and now that we're looking to rehire, we're having a hard time finding people, especially experienced and more senior stylists. We're starting to see some people for the junior positions. The schools are starting to graduate apprentices and new hairdressers. So we're seeing a little bit of interest that way, but it's been really difficult.
Rebecca, where do you think they have gone?
I think there's a few different places. I know that people have left the industry entirely, gone back to school, pursued other creative pursuits. I think there is an underground industry for hairdressers right now that people are working, going to people's homes or working from their own home. And I think when you're locked out of work for so long, you look for something that's going to be a little more secure.
Lindsay, how about in your world? Where do you think the workers have gone?
Yeah, I agree with Rebecca. I think that because of all the lockdowns, people were forced to leave the industry because they had to find something that was stable. They're just worried about when the next lockdown is going to be. When there's restricted, amounts of people that we can have in the restaurant and stuff, and we're forced to lay people off or give them less shifts, like, they still need to pay their bills, right? So they've been going to different industries, and even offering to pay them more and stuff. That's not really the issue. It's just they've gone to different industries entirely.
And Lindsay, have you tried, for example, I don't know what, like offering a few bucks more an hour, raising the potential wages they could earn if they were to come back? You have done that.
Absolutely, yeah. We've raised the wages. Our ownership group has agreed to match the tip out that we normally do anyways. We're out in the country kind of, so you can't take public transit here. So we've even toyed with the idea of paying for people's Ubers back and forth just to get them out here, like literally anything. We've basically exhausted every regular avenue. So,
Rebecca, how about you? Have you tried wage increases?
We have, yeah. We've increased the hourly base pay for our staff. We've added paid sick days that weren't something that we used to do before that were typical in our industry. And I guess those are the 2 main things that we've done to try and encourage people and make us look more desirable. But we know that all the salons in the city are looking for staff. So it's also, there's a lot of places looking.
Well, can I ask you a bit of a tricky question here, Rebecca, and you won't get mad at me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted the green light first before I was going to do it.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe some of the people who once worked for you are out there in the underground economy, working under the table, doing it secretly or surreptitiously? They're still in the business. They're just not doing it with you anymore.
I think that's happening. Amongst my staff that I lost, I know where most people have gone, and that's not the case with people that I've lost. But I do think there are people out there who are earning a living doing hair from their home, and it's underground. It's not going to be reported back to the CRA.
Lindsay, how about you? Is there a similar kind of experience that could be happening in your line of work?
Honestly, here, I don't think so. I think they've really changed industries or gone to school for them or into business for themselves. I think we used to have a lot of younger staff too. And I think that those staff are just, not working right now and supporting themselves other ways. So,
Lindsay, let me share another thing that I've occasionally heard from people, and that is the jobs they used to do were jobs they did because they needed a paycheck. They didn't necessarily do it because they loved it. And once the pandemic came and showed them how difficult or fragile life could be, they just weren't about to risk their health or anything else for what was, in their view, not a significant enough paycheck anyway. You think there's any of that?
Yeah, that's fair. I think that some people, like the people that are still in the industry, are in the industry because they're passionate about what they do. They love cooking, they love serving guests, they love making people happy. And so those are the people that have remained. For those that were just there for a paycheck, just like any industry, it's obviously understandable. I think there was a lot of challenges in the restaurant industry before in terms of like paid sick days or pay and things like that. And so the pandemic has really shifted that a little bit because there's a lot more benefit to working in the restaurants. But if it was just a job to you and you don't care about doing it, then obviously it makes sense that those people are gone anyways.
Rebecca, how about for you? Do you think that that phenomenon has captured your industry as well?
I think in some segments of our industry, that's probably true, but I think there's a lot of people that are creative, artistic personality types. And when they weren't able to do that legit, go to work for 9 months, they found ways to do it, especially because in our industry, we know that the salons were safe. When we reopened after the first lockdown, there wasn't COVID spread happening in salons. So when we were locked down again, that's when I think people went underground because they knew they could do their job safely, taking the proper precautions. And they wanted to continue to make people happy and share those relationships that we build with people and pursue their creative, artistic side doing hair.
Gotcha. I think I've got one more question for you, Rebecca, before our time's up. And that is, now, admittedly, I'm not exactly at my best right now, but I mean, look at my hair. Can you do anything with it? What do you think?
I think your hair looks fantastic, Steve. They're taking very good care of you.
Now, are you lying to me? You should never lie to a guy who's suffering from COVID, okay?
No, I think your hair looks great.
Well, whether you mean it or whether you don't,
color?
I'm taking it.
I could like paint some rainbows in there.
No. I'm good. I'm probably the only guy in television who's not coloring his hair, so we're going to keep it that way. It's really good of both of you to join us tonight here on TVO and lay out what the challenges are in both of your industries tonight. So take good care. Lots of luck going forward and stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, with that in place, let's get a wider sense of what's going on and why. And to do that, we welcome in Stratford, Ontario, Kaylee Thiessen, economist and policy analyst working in the research department at the labor union Unifor, and in Burlington, Ontario, Craig Alexander, President, Chief Economist, and Executive Advisor at Deloitte Canada. And as I welcome you two to the program, what stands out, Kaylee, among what you just heard? That's obviously a look on the ground. You see the bigger macro picture. What can you add to that?
The one thing that really stands out to me right away is just how much they talked about the uncertainty of whether or not people have transitioned to new industries or what they're doing instead. I think a lot of people have found a way to create employment and income for themselves in places where they weren't looking for it before or didn't know that they could find it. And that's one piece of this puzzle. One thing that I was really curious about, and I'd love to interrogate a little bit more, is when we're talking about job quality, what are the things that are on offer? There was an article recently from the CBC, and it was on Pizzeria Libretto that just talked directly about improving employment quality for their employers or employees and actually being able to find the workers that they needed. So in an industry like hospitality with such a high vacancy rate, that's something that seems like it would work pretty well and shows anecdotally at least that it has so far.
Interesting. Craig, how about you? What stood out?
Well, I think it really summarizes how the hard-hit industries are being affected. And it really highlights how the health risks and the risk that jobs are more precarious. In other words, worries that, the health risk is still out there. The employees are putting themselves at risk, but at the same time, they're also concerned that the job will go away again if there's new government restrictions. The one thing I'd flag, though, is I think that many people appreciate the challenges that hair salons and restaurants and other hard-hit industries, like hotels, et cetera, are experiencing labor shortages. But I would actually argue that those labor shortages are far more broad, that in point of fact, across the entire economy, many sectors, if not most sectors, are experiencing some labor shortages at the moment for a variety of different reasons.
Kaylee, do you want to follow up on your first answer? You think there may be something deeper, more systemic at play here?
Yes. I guess what I've been watching for is wondering how transitions will happen and what will transition over time in the economy as consumer demand has changed. We're looking more to people buying online versus going to stores and ordering food online versus going into a restaurant. How will that settle out in the long term is something we don't know. yet, but we will know eventually. And then in terms of just thinking through broader labor shortages, I think that's something that was happening long before the pandemic hit. This is certainly not a new topic. And we've heard, you know, in the skilled trades industry, in many other industries, people talking about the need for highly skilled workers or semi-skilled workers. And in fact, we have tons of solutions for that. I know we're going to get to that later, but it's certainly not a new conversation. It's just something that maybe has heightened since the pandemic happened.
Yeah, Craig, let me put a couple of numbers to you and get your take on this, because now let's go back pre-pandemic. January 2020, the unemployment rate in the province of Ontario was 5.2%. Pretty good number. In August 2021, last month, it was 7.6%. 5.2 versus 7.6. How unusual is it in an economy to have a high unemployment rate and a worker shortage at the same time?
The unemployment rate shows you that there is slack in the labor market, that there's people who are looking for jobs but can't find them. And at the same time, we have statistics from StatsCan that shows that in June, there was 815,000 vacant jobs. So we have people without jobs, and we have jobs without people, and that tells you that there's a mismatch happening in the labor market. And I think some of it is captured by the interview that we had, like people going back to school who are retraining for retraining. They're, you know, going back to get some additional skills development. That's a positive thing. Now they won't actually count as unemployed if they aren't looking for work, but if they're currently upskilling, trying to get into a new job, a new area, a new industry, and they're looking and they haven't been able to get in, well, then they would be counted as unemployed. So it's very clear that that some industries are under enormous pressure in terms of trying to find workers, but they can't find the workers that they need. And simultaneously, there are people who are looking for jobs that can't seem to find them. The other thing that has been commented on, as you know, so there's some speculation about, is that the increased generosity of the employment insurance benefits could be having people who are, you know, they're reporting that they're looking for work, but they're not actually taking jobs because they can get those expanded EI benefits. And so there could be a government, you know, there could be a disincentive to work from the current government programs, but that's going to change after September 25. So on the 25th, I think the EI eligibility will drop, and some of that factor will diminish.
Well, you've nicely gone to where I wanted to follow up, and that is, yes, Kaylee, I'm sure you've heard it, everybody's heard it, that lots of people have simply decided, because of the generosity of unemployment benefits during the pandemic, that they're just going to sit it out for a little while. How much of that do you think is going on?
I think that the changes to the unemployment benefits as well
in knowledge of this early treatment. And so we work to fill that gap, one by increasing knowledge. And while hospital systems like Larry's at Lee Health and here in Tampa, at Tampa General, had been embracing monoclonal antibodies really since they were given emergency use authorization at the end of 2020, many physicians did not know about it, and it was not something that was being utilized to the fullest extent. So we saw that gap. We saw that folks were testing positive. We saw the admissions escalating, and we wanted to provide help for people. So we started talking more about the notion that COVID is a treatable illness, that there is an ability to get early treatment, and if you do it early in the form of monoclonal antibodies, the track record has been very, very good. And so we worked in August to expand that message, but also to expand access. And so we've stood up over 25 different sites throughout the state of Florida, including one right here in Hillsborough County. We did one in Pinellas, Manatee, Pasco, all up and down the state. Many of those, or all of those, could see over 300 patients a day. We were doing So not only have they cut dramatically from what we were using, they're now saying this is also what the hospitals get as well. So we're in a situation where we have to now send to the providers that need it. So statewide in Florida, where we had 45,000 doses a week just a few weeks ago, we're now less than 18,000 doses of Regeneron. So we have to provide to Lee Health, we have to provide to Tampa General, and we have to provide for our sites. And that's not a good situation to be in. That is not a 50% increase. That's a dramatic reduction. And I would hate to see somebody who really could benefit from this treatment not be able to have access to it when we know that the track record has been very, very positive, not just in the clinical data and real-world data, and of course Florida being the most recent example where you see thousands and thousands of people being kept out of the hospital. So cutting the medication to Florida and other states is wrong. It's not consistent with the promise that was made just a couple weeks ago, and we are going to continue to fight against that. At the same time, I as governor have a responsibility to do everything I can to provide help for folks who need it. And so, yes, we have much lower hospital numbers, much lower cases. Everything like that is much better than it was a month ago, but at the same time, COVID doesn't go away. At the same time, we do see people who are vaccinated who've tested positive much more frequently than we had anticipated just 6 months ago. And so we know there's going to be a continuing need to make this early treatment available for folks. And so I'm in some respects sad that I have to announce, but I am happy that we're not just sitting on our rump. We're making things happen. So the state of Florida has been able to acquire an additional 3,000 doses of the monoclonal antibody sotrovimab, which is manufactured by GlaxoSmithKline. It got emergency use approval just a few months ago. The clinical data that they had was really, really strong. In fact, it was even stronger than Regeneron, and we know Regeneron's been very, very effective in real world. So we're going to be able to use that sotrovimab to bridge some of the gaps that are going to be developing as a result of the Biden administration dramatically cutting medications to the state of Florida. Now, the sotrovimab is an IV only, whereas the Regeneron is approved not just for IV, but also subcutaneous injections. The folks you'll see here who will talk about what they were able to get at our state-supported sites, they all got injections. Injections are easier. It's 4 shots, 2 in the belly, 1 in each arm. They do observe you, just like they would observe when we did vaccines. You want to see if there's a reaction. So they do observe for an hour, but you can go in and get it quicker. The IV takes a little bit longer to administer, and so that will, even though we have these doses, we're going to use them, you're not going to be able to do 320, most likely, doses at a given site. Nevertheless, we're happy to be able to have acquired this. We are going to put it to good use, and we're going to continue with our state sites. At the same time, we may have to be making decisions soon about how many of the sites can remain open. We're making decisions about how many doses each hospital is going to get, and these are not decisions that we should be having to make. Clearly, these are not decisions that would need to be made if they had increased the allotments by 50% instead of dramatically cutting it like they did. But sotrovimab is coming to the state of Florida. We are going to be deploying it, and particularly for our high-risk population, we want them to be able to, as soon as they test positive or as soon as they develop symptoms, to be able to come in and get that early treatment. I think the results have been very good so far, and I anticipate, given how strong the clinical data has been with sotrovimab, I anticipate we're going to continue to see very positive results going forward. Now, I do want to say, as much as it's been good, we've really helped change the narrative nationally by making this available. Many people are interested in this early treatment throughout the country. You know, this has been something that's been being done in Florida really for the whole year. And Larry down at Lee Health has been doing, as I mentioned, I did an event a month or two ago at Tampa General. They were doing the clinic, they were doing some of the experimental treatments even before it got the emergency use. So Florida hospital systems, many of them have embraced this and have had a lot of success with it. We've now really, I think, increased the understanding of it, the public awareness of it, and of course, we've made it easy access. And so, but I want Larry to be able to come up and be able to talk about how they've used it at Lee Health, and I think how they're going to continue to want to be able to draw down supply of these very effective early treatments. So Larry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis. The monoclonal antibody program has really been a game changer here in the state of Florida. We know, based on the studies, that if you give monoclonal antibodies within the first few days of diagnosis, you can reduce the hospitalization rate by 70%. This is incredible. And if you look at just at our region in Lee County, the state has given over 8,000 doses. You can imagine how many people have been saved hospitalization. And it's reflected in what we're seeing. At the peak of this Delta surge, we were admitting 80 to 100 patients a day with COVID. Now we're admitting in the mid-20s. And our census has gone from 652 down to 251. So it's made an incredible difference. It's getting people better. It's getting people better quicker. It's keeping them out of the hospital. And I think you'll hear some testimonials today from patients who received this antibody, and they'll tell you that it was easy, it was well run, minimal to no side effects, and they felt better quickly. So I want to thank the governor and his whole team for doing this. It's made all the difference in the world here in Florida.
Okay, well, we're happy to have some folks here who've been able to benefit from the monoclonal antibody treatments. So the first is Lou Castoria. He had heard about Regeneron. I mean, the first time most people heard about Regeneron was when President Trump got it, and that was not even on the market yet at the time. It was experimental. Lou tested positive recently, and he was able to utilize it. So he's going to come up and tell his story.
I'm going to read from a prepared statement. So I'm Lou Castoria. I'm 58 years old, and I live in Land O'Lakes, Florida. I'm a senior software developer for a large financial firm based in the state of Florida. Before I get started, I'd like to thank the governor and his staff for having me out to tell my story and making monoclonal antibody treatment available widely in the state of Florida. I started feeling ill August 29th. Through the day, I felt worse and worse. Sunday evening, I assumed that I had COVID-19. At that point, I decided to get the monoclonal antibody treatment. I went to the Florida Health Department's website, clicked on the link, scheduled my appointment for Tuesday. Monday morning, I went to the doctor and was tested for COVID-19, and as expected, I was tested positive. So then on Tuesday, for my appointment, I went there, and at this point, I was feeling much worse. I had 101 fever, rapid heart rate, and very tired. I then got the treatment, and by Thursday evening, by Tuesday evening, I was feeling much better. My fever had dropped, and by Wednesday, I had no fever anymore, and by Thursday, I was able to return to work. Now, I work remotely, so I wasn't going to get anybody infected, and today, I'm back to 100% with no lingering issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have Betsy Palmer Bigler. So she's a former math teacher and science teacher from Pasco County. She has her husband receive Regeneron, and then they're being in the same household. She received it before she even tested positive prophylactically. So she's going to come tell that story.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very happy and delighted to share what happened in our household with the COVID. My husband was unknowingly exposed by a coworker and started with some flu-like symptoms.
I think that the change.
In knowledge of this early treatment. And so we work to fill that gap, one by increasing knowledge, and while hospital systems like Larry's at Lee Health and here in Tampa General had been embracing monoclonal antibodies really since they were given emergency use authorization at the end of 2020, many physicians did not know about it, and it was not something.
Governor, how would you respond if and when the president issues widespread COVID testing in schools? Is that something you would fight here in Florida? And your response to the judge ruling that the anti-riot law you support violates First Amendment rights?
I did not know.
First Amendment rights.
I did not know that. Which court was that decide that? Because we got the one dismissed. Was that
chat, no job, no mask, no ride, no smile. No expression, it's mask aside. I got the COVID blues and I'm blue as I can be. Well, they're taking my freedom and they're stealing our lives.
I got the COVID blues and I'm as blue as I can be. Yep. Take a look at your Trends Journal. Today is Tuesday, September 21st. 2021, 21-21. And here it is, another Anthony Frida home run. Yeah, we're losing our patience, yeah. So we're gonna shoot you to vax you to death. And that's what's going on around the world. I mean, look what's going on over there in Australia. Those little slimy, gutless COVID cops, you little creepy, sucky freaks. You see the pictures of this guy beating a woman, his mask down, and shooting, pepper spray and rubber bullets. These people. You little nothings. Oh, and they're denouncing the construction workers for fighting back against being forced vaccinations. Oh, how terrible. How terrible. And of course, they put the agents provocateurs out there to make it look like, they're a rowdy group. This thing is going down big and hard. And the Italians, what a disgrace. The Fangool, you little clown boys and girls bringing in that Draghi. Yeah, that dragging out that Draghi shit and making him your prime minister. And now everybody that's working got to get the vaccination. In the United States, it's only people with 100 jobs. You see where this thing is going? Yeah, we're losing our patience. Take a look at the cover. You know who these are? Get this in your head. Get this in your fucking head. They're drug dealers. Got it? Got it? And these little slimy little pricks, these little scumbags like little fucking Danny Andrews over there in Australia. Look at this little shithead. This little prick couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag, but he's a tough boy. Yeah, you know why? Look who we got behind him. That's right, we're losing our patience. The drug dealers. That's who they are. And they're in charge. Banksters, drug dealers, the military-industrial complex, and big tech. Big tech, little ballers, boys and girls over there. Yeah. Cook, yeah. Zuckerberg, Dorsey, girls and boys. Little nothings. Clowns. As George Gammon said when I did one of his interviews, at the end of the empire, it's the weak leading the weak. And that's what we got going on now. So going back to today's news and why you subscribe to the Trends Journal, take a look at the front page of Drudge. There it is. High stakes at UN, escalating crisis, world inflection, yeah. Taliban, yeah. Nothing. Means total bullshit. Military-industrial complex horseshit to sell more weaponry. And that's all this AUKUS, A-U-K-U-S, you know, Australia, UK, and US. AUKUS, fuck us. That's what it is. Selling them, 8 submarines. Big fucking deal. Oh, yeah, 25 million people in Australia, about 67 million in I don't know how many in the UK, whatever, and 336 million in the United States, 332 million, against 1.4 billion in China. Who are you kidding? This is all bullshit. Bullshit. And that's all they're selling. Oh, what happened what's going on in the equity markets? No, that's not making headline news. What happened in the equity markets today? Oh man, hey, Salenti, they were up over 300 points today. Oh, no, wait a minute. Didn't they close down over 50? Down 50 points? You mean they were up over 300? And what were they down yesterday? They were almost down 1,000 yesterday, 972. That only closed down 600 and something. Is that making the news? No. Go to the Cartoon News Network, CNN. Look at the bullshit there. Yeah. Autopsy confirms remains found in Wyoming are Gabby Petito's, FBI says. And then a couple gets thrown out for not wearing a mask. These are the headlines. Who is this woman? You know, I'm sorry for what happened to her. But why am I seeing this every day? What's the big, she was going to be a social media star? All right, this is according to Vox. Nearly 21,000 people were murdered in America in 2020. Wait a minute. 21,000 people were murdered in America in 2020? Another increase of 10% or more could mean thousands more dead in 2021, according to Vox. And you're showing me day after day after day after day after day this one young woman, may her soul rest in peace, died? This is who these scumbags are, selling this shit. And who are the shit sellers? How about going back to CNN? Yeah. Don Lemon says unvaccinated people should be shunned or left behind. Don Lemon? You fucking lemonhead little nothing. He's asking people to stop coddling the unvaccinated, calling them stupid for believing vaccine misinformation. Hey, look, fuckface, don't you call me stupid. I know the information, you little dick, and you probably got a little one. The people who aided and abetted Trump are stupid because they believed his big lie. The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science, it's time to start shaming them or leaving them behind. I'm not a Trump supporter, you little clown boy, you little nothing of a jerk. And what science? I know. You're the little scumbags that sell the drug ads on TV when they tell you how fucked up you are by taking this stuff, but it's going to make you feel good for a little while. Yep, Lemon, who CNN confirmed is fully vaccinated, compared COVID-19 vaccine to other medical vaccines for polio or measles. Hey, stupid. Hey, you ignorant little fuck. You can't compare them. You can't compare them. This is a gene therapy shot. You got it. It isn't a vaccination like the chicken pox or measles, mumphead. You don't have to listen to a minority of people who are being harmful. Oh, you got to listen to the majority. And what being harmful, fuckface? You got the vaccination, you're safe. Oh no, that little Chrissy Rock. What Rock? Ballless little dickhead screaming and yelling for people to get vaccinated. Yeah, after he bragged about 2 shots Rock, and now he got the virus, and he's telling people to get the vaccination. Hey, wait a minute. You got the vaccination. How come you got the virus? Oh, you mean because it's only 39% effective according to the CD? No, according to the Israeli Health Ministry. Yep. And Chris Cuomo agreed with Lemon, saying the majority cannot be healed by the tyranny of the minority. Don't you fucking call me a tyrant of the minority, you little sucking bitch bastard, you little daddy's boy arrogant fuckface. Oh, be calm, Salenti. Suck up their shit. Go to CNN. Look what they run. This is the crap that they put on. Yeah. Autopsy confirms remains found in Wyoming. Although 21,000 people died last year. And two little clowns who wear masks going out. That's the news that they use. So going back to the Trends Journal, in this week's Trends Journal, there's a lot on the economic front. Yep, a lot. Inflation, a whole special section. The big's getting bigger. What it means, a whole special section. Yep. Featured articles by Gary Null. You better get healthy, and they're telling you one way to do it. Another great article by Gregory Marino. I keep calling me Anthony. By Gregory Marino. Manarino. Gregory Manarino, my paisano. Is a market correction possible? The whole thing is a fraud game. Again, great articles by Joe Duran on technocracy, a whole section on trends in cryptos. You can see where the cryptos are going. Is it real? Is it going to keep going there? A lot on the COVID war. Think about it. They call a little shithead scumbag motherfucker, or maybe he's a fatherfucker, little Don Lemon, making fun of people like me because I won't get the vaccination. But how about all of those nursing home aides that won't get a vaccination? Oh, hey, dickhead, lemonhead, are they Trump supporters? Hey, how about moron Cuomo? Maybe the nursing home people aren't getting vaccinated because they see the deleterious effects of all the people they work with day and night who've been overvaxxed. So then you read the other articles we have in here about vaccinations and what's going on in the nursing homes with the vaccinations. More on the COVID war, rich getting richer, poor getting poorer. The COVID deaths, you can't believe them. If you die within 14 days of getting the shot, you didn't die of the virus, you died of COVID. Yep. Trends in geopolitics. The U.S. launches Cold War 2.0. President Xi refuses face-to-face meeting with Biden. What all this means? Oh, you know, they had war crimes against the guy in Kosovo, the Kosovo war. How about where's the Hague? How come you're not bringing George Bush up on war crimes for lying us into the Iraq war? Or Obama bombing the hell out of Libya and Syria. Where are their war crimes? Oh, you're worried about, a young woman dying in Wyoming? Again, may his soul rest in peace. Terrible what's happened to her. But how about the millions of people that these guys killed? Oh, they don't count. They count for nothing. We have how and when electric vehicles will go mainstream. A big article in here by Ben Davis. So if you're going to invest, you want to know what you're going to be investing in. Oh, what's going on there in Argentina and what it means, the economy and geopolitics. What else do we have here? Vaxxed horror stories that the media is ignoring after they ask for them. Irish vax. Get vaxxed, get COVID, get sick. Whole ton of stories again on the economic front. We're nailing this thing perfectly. This may be the month of the collapse. But remember, as Gregory Mannarino says, is a market correction possible? The game is rigged. They make up shit called the plunge protection team. Hey, we got to protect our guys over there if they're losing too much money, you know? So, another important article in here as well, the real answer to violent crime. As I mentioned, crime rates continue to escalate. They're going off the charts. We had forecast this. When people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. So there you got it. And remember, one other story I want to mention in there. Did you know that on September 10th, 2001, the day before 9/11, the NASDAQ was down 66% from its high and still crashing hard that day. That's right. Go back to our Trends Journal, October 1999. .com bust. We said it would bust by the second quarter of 2000, and it busted in March of 2000. Bush gets elected. We're in a deep recession. His poll ratings are plunging. The markets are crashing. All of a sudden, 9/11. The next day. I wonder if it's a coincidence. We have an article in there by Phil Giraldi, who was a former intelligence agency agent, CIA. That's right. Great article in there in this Trends Journal with a link to Phil Giraldi. And again, more there in this Trends Journal with a link to Phil Giraldi. And again, more information about how much money the Federal Reserve started pumping into the markets on 9/11. Hey, little dictator Lemonhead and Cuomo and all the rest of yous that call it a conspiracy theory. Those are facts, fuckface. This is Gerald Celente, and that's some of today's Trends in the News in the Trends Journal. Subscribe to the Trends Journal at trendsjournal.com to read history before it happens. Support us in fighting for peace, because when all else fails, they take you to war. I told you what happened when the dot-com bust happened. 9/11 followed. When these markets crash, you mark my words, they will divert our attention and take us into another military conflict. When all else fails, they take you to war. So donate to OccupyPeace.com. And again, follow me on Twitter and keep spreading the word. Spreading the word. Oh, and go to, please, richdad.com, Robert Kiyosaki. It's a great interview I did with him, and I'm honored to be on with him, and George Gammon. So thank you very much. Stay tuned, and we have some big news coming. See you soon. The COVID-19 war has changed the world, but who's prepared? What's next? It's in your Trends Journal. Trends Journal subscribers are prepared. Subscribe to the Trends Journal. Read history before it happens. From the world leader September 21st, 2021, 21-21. And here it is, another Anthony Frieda home run. Yeah, we're losing our patience, yeah. So we're going to shoot you to vax you to death. And that's what's going on around the world. I mean, look what's going on over there in Australia. Those little slimy Hey, hello, hello. This is Gerald Celente, and boy, what a day today is. A day that will be remembered in history. Yep. C-N-A-N-D-N. Celente and Judge Napolitano. Yeah, and this is the honest truth, the truth, not the CNN fake stuff. But this is CNN, Celente and Napolitano. I got to say Napolitano because Napolitano is Napolitano. And this is the truth, the honest truth. Because all we're being fed are streams of lies, moronic nonsense. Like when you look at CNN, the headlines, a guy and his wife got thrown out of a restaurant because they were wearing masks. That was the front page of CNN. And the other one about this young lady that's missing. You know, it's terrible that she's missing, but 21,000 murders last year in the United States, according to Vox. Why am I hearing this as the one story? So what we're doing is we're giving you the information, the facts, and the data that are important to our lives that CNN, the Cartoon News Network, is keeping quiet while they're selling fear and hysteria, and CNN is the honest truth. Judge Napolitano.
Gerald, it's always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for that introduction. Your observations about this young girl who now has been found dead show the power of the media. The country fixated on one missing person out of 90,000 missing Americans every year, because the media just decided this was the most titillating one, and it dominated the news for 10 days, and it probably will continue to dominate until they find her fiance, whether he's involved in her death or not. Once they find him, then it'll go below the radar. But shows their power.
Yeah, I'll tell you when it began to decline. I was being interviewed by, remember 48 Hours on CBS?
Sure.
Yeah. They came up when I was in Rhinebeck, and they were doing a show with me. And I said to the woman, and she was I forgot her name, but she was really, really sharp reporter, journalist, a real journalist. And I said, why are they covering this, who was that guy, that football guy, who was in the news all the time? Who was it? Just drew a blank. I knew his face. What was his name?
O.J. Simpson?
O.J. Simpson. That's when it began to go down. What the hell do O.J. Simpson, O.J. Simpson, O.J. Simpson. That was the beginning of the death of it.
You know, I'm laughing because, and I know this is not what we planned on talking about, I almost owe my 25-year television career to O.J. Simpson, because Roger Ailes, when he was the head of CNBC, hired me expressly to analyze that trial. And I did it 5 days a week for 13 months.
All right, I got to tell you. Funny. Yeah.
Boy.
So on the important notes that we're talking, and again, this is very important because, you know, CNN, again, we wrote about it in the Trends Journal back in February of 2020, that little clown boy running the show over there, Zucker, or maybe you take that Z out and throw an F in there. This is the guy that told his staff to keep going on with the coronavirus because their ratings were going up. Their ratings were in the toilet. They had hardly anybody tuning in before then. And they did, and they kept selling fear and hysteria. And the fear and hysteria keeps being sold, and of course now the government is in full control of selling the fear and hysteria. And you wrote an article yesterday that has been put out about what Biden has done in his mandates of telling corporations, private enterprises, that if you got 100 employees or more, they got to get vaxxed or they can't go to work. Is this America?
Well, the first problem is in America, we have a constitution, and the Constitution has been interpreted by the Supreme Court to say we control what goes in our bodies. Just as a sick and dying person can refuse medication, a healthy person can decline medication, particularly an experimental vaccine, which is basically what this is. But the president, who is scrambling for some sort of a success, he's had a foreign policy disaster. His own party is fighting amongst themselves in the Congress. He's scrambling for a domestic success, has decided, since the Congress won't enact legislation forcing us to be vaccinated because there's no political will for that in the Congress and they don't have the authority to do it anyway, he'll do it. And so he issued a regulation, told the Department of Labor to tell every employer, you're quite correct, Gerald, who employs more than 100 people, if your people aren't vaccinated, we will fine you. There'll be no trial. We're the judge and jury. We will fine you $14,000 a day per unvaccinated employee. So can the government force private enterprise to enforce its own regulations when the president writes the regulations, not the Congress? The short answer to that is no, which is why the regulations were announced by the president 2.5 weeks ago. Gerald, they have yet to be written and they've yet to be promulgated because lawyers in the DOJ are probably telling lawyers in the White House, he can't do this. So we're waiting to see what these regulations say. When the president announced them, he said, this is not about civil liberties or personal freedom. It sure as heck is when the government wants to force vaccinate you against your will.
You know, you also mentioned about the 13th Amendment, and it prohibits involuntary servitude.
It doesn't prohibit voluntary servitude. And when we voluntarily comply with these unconstitutional, immoral mandates of the government, like you shall enforce our regulation, you shall intrude onto your employees' privacy, you shall force your employees to get vaccinated, that is forcing a private employer, say a mom and pop organization that employs more than 100 people, to work for the government against its will and without compensation. Now, what do you call that when the government forces you to work for it against your will and without compensation? Slavery.
Slavery.
And slavery, they call it involuntary servitude because they didn't want to use the word slavery in the Constitution. Slavery is prohibited by the 13th Amendment, but voluntary servitude is not. And if we cow to the government and do what it tells us, when we know it lacks the authority to do it, when it interferes with our business judgment as to how to use assets that we've raised to sell a service or a product or a good, we become voluntary slaves to the government. That's the danger. That's where we're heading, Gerald. That's my greatest fear.
Well, I agree with you. You know what I say? All we've become is plantation workers on the global plantation of Slavelandia.
Yes.
And you remember when you and I were young guys, there were things called grocery stores, hardware stores, stationery stores.
Right. Bakeries.
Now they're chains.
Yes.
Because, as you well know, they did away with the Robbins-Patman Act, Sherman Antitrust Act, Clayton Antitrust Act, all of them. And they allow the bigs to take over.
And
every time I go into one of these stores, my heart breaks when I see these people working there because they have no future. Right. I go to a Hannaford's, and I go to a Lowe's or a Home Depot, and you see the people working there. They have no future. In the old days, when you worked at the grocery store, the hardware store, the stationery store, you say to yourself as a young guy, hey, maybe I'm going to learn over here and I'm going to open my own place.
Correct. The other reason that all this has happened is the Federal Reserve printing cash and devaluing everything that we own. And so you could no longer make a living selling groceries or selling baked goods or selling stationery. And the big guys bought you up for less than you were worth. That's where we are today. This is not a Democrat problem or a Republican problem. This is a big government problem. Yep. This is a problem of Leviathan, a government that knows no restraints on itself and wants to tell us how to live. Also a government of cronyism, a government that wants to take care of its patrons, the little guys, and the Constitution be damned.
Yeah, you look at merger and acquisition activity, it's at an all-time high. Because they're getting all this cheap money, and the bigs are getting bigger and buying out everybody.
Correct.
So going back to servitude and slavery, all we are plantation workers of Slavelandia.
Well, it gets even worse if the Democrats, I don't know that this will pass because there's some stable thinkers in the Senate, very few, but enough to block it. The proposal of the House Ways and Means Committee to raise taxes will, for people like you and me that live in New York and New Jersey, have an effective tax rate of north of 60%. Now, if that's not slavery, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and again, you saw what happened under Trump. He gave 82% of his tax breaks went to the 1%.
Correct. My taxes actually went up because they get rid of the deduction on state and local taxes. And in New Jersey, we have the highest state and local taxes in the union. So I have to pay a tax on the tax, which is inconceivable. Could you imagine what Jefferson or Madison would have thought about that?
Yeah, this is. You also in your article you wrote, all this can happen only if we let it.
We're letting it happen.
Yeah.
We're letting it happen. Look,
what can we do to change this?
Well, if the feds go to Walmart and threaten Walmart, 500,000 employees, It's not going to put Walmart out of business. But if the feds go to some business 2 miles from me or 2 miles from you, hardworking person like you are, who happens to have 150 employees, and they start second guessing his business judgment, well, you can't have that person work. You can't have that person work. It'll have a catastrophic economic effect on the business and a catastrophic personal effect on the individual who can't work. I mean, $14,000 a day per employee. No jury trial. Forget about due process. The Department of Labor will just come and take $14,000 per employee per day after you reveal their private medical information to us out of your bank account. I mean, this is Joe Stalin's dream, that Joe Biden could have this kind of power over private enterprise. Now, why doesn't the government enforce this regulation itself? Well, the Congress would have to authorize it, and there's no will in the Congress for it. And the government would have to pay for this itself, and there's no will in the government, there's no ability in the government to enforce this. So they're trying to get private enterprise to enforce a presidential dictate. It's not even a statute written into law.
And this isn't being talked about as you're speaking about it.
No, it's not.
No one's saying this.
It's not being talked about. What's being talked about is the death rate, the sickness rate, the effectiveness of the vaccine, and as our friend RFK Jr. said at a conference that you and I attended recently, the gross demonization of the unvaccinated. The unvaccinated are heroes because they're basically saying to the government, stop, leave me alone.
Yeah. Again, again, you and it was such an honor to be speaking at Dr. Ron Paul's War on Us event.
It was a great gathering. You brought the house down. Congressman Thomas Massey did, Bobby Kennedy did it, Jeff Dice did. It was a great gathering. There needs to be more gatherings like that. You asked what we can do. People need to learn what their rights are. They need to know when they can say to the government, you shall not cross the threshold of my house or my business or my bank account. And then we need to begin sort of a soft secession. We need government power to stop flowing from local and state to the feds and start flowing from the feds to local and state, or start dissipating. All of government has too much power to regulate our lives. The states are no angels, but at least the states are closer to us, and we have more of an opportunity to influence what the states do. Federal bureaucracy of 3 million people, Donald Trump couldn't tame it. Nobody will tame it.
Yeah, but you talk about the states. Look at the state of New York over here. I can't, we went out to dinner last week, and we had to sit outside. I had to sit outside because I'm not vaccinated.
Correct. Because you exercised a right that the Supreme Court has recognized under the Constitution, we had to sit outside. Turned out to be a lovely venue and a lovely dinner, but that's not the point.
It was a wonderful time. It was great sitting outside. That's one of the good things that happened, by the way.
Right, but the point is, you and I, at that moment in our lives, in the middle of the richest city in the world, two very healthy people did not have the opportunity to exercise free choice, and neither did the restaurateur.
Yeah.
Because if he let us eat inside and didn't check you for your vaccine status, guess what they'll do to him? They'll take his liquor license, and if he can't sell alcohol, he can't pay his rent.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's bigger than federal, it's state as well.
Correct.
And we're losing our freedom. This is my suggestion.
Let me hear it.
How did the Berlin Wall come down?
The Berlin Wall came down because people got sick and tired of it. The President of the United States said, tear down that wall, Mr. Gorbachev, and eventually the public ripped it down.
That's right.
Not the government, the public.
The public. The people came out, they stayed, and they didn't leave. More people came.
Right.
They stayed and they didn't leave.
Right.
More people came. They stayed and they didn't leave.
Right.
You can't go on these. I was speaking at one of the rallies, against what de Blasio, Warren Wilhelm Jr. Yeah, really a junior little piece of crap when he put these mandates on. I was at Columbus Circle, one of the speakers. Only about 3,000 people turned out of 8.3 million.
I know,
now,
but Gerald, that's a good number for New York City, 2,000 or 3,000.
Well, when they have, this is the story and why I think we have to go and not leave. Back in 1982, I'll never forget it. There was a protest rally in Central Park against nuclear arms. Almost 1 million people turned out. 1 million. And then Caspar Weinberger, the criminal with the Iran-Contra thing that, oh, you get a free ride because you're a member of the club. Yeah, that Caspar Weinberger, who really pushed the nuclear movement as the defense secretary under Reagan, he's quoted as saying, these aren't his exact words, after the rally. Yeah, it was a very impressive rally. And we watched, but after it's over, it really doesn't make any difference. We're still going to do what we want.
That's because they stayed and went home. If they stayed and didn't leave, like they did in Berlin, the government's hand would be forced.
Yes. And to me, that's what we have to do. We all have to get together, surround, like, for example, City Hall in New York, and say, little de Blasio, you're not coming out until you do what we tell you to do. Your little boy that never worked a day in your life, that's been sucking off the public tit, you forgot 2 words. They all forgot these 2 words. Public servant.
Right. Does the government work for us or do we work for the government? If we asked that question 100 years ago, it would be laughable. Today, we all know the answer. The government treats us as if we work for it.
And what does the Declaration of Independence say?
We have the inalienable right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the Constitution says they can't take life, liberty, or property away from us without a jury trial at which they prove fault, not a dictate from the president or a governor or a mayor. Why do these things happen? Because we don't show up and stay. We show up and leave, or we don't show up at all. Stated differently, these things happen because we let them happen, Gerald.
And I'm saying we are in the fight for our lives. And as you well know, I'm doing everything and you're doing everything you can. I hold these rallies up in Kingston and you graciously speak at them. But the rally's over and the day is finished.
And
we have to do something. And to me, and as you know, when I gave the talk, and it's happening now, at Ron Paul's, I started crying because my business, I'm a visionary and I see the future. And this isn't my kind of America. I'm heartbroken. So,
well, it is heartbreaking what the government, Republicans and Democrats, have done to us. And I see the future too, and it's a very dark one. I don't even want to say everything that I see, but I do see that at some point, the government will not be able to pay its bills anymore. The federal government will go out of business. That'll be a very good thing. And the country will break apart into smaller republics. Now, you don't want to live in the Northeast if that happens, because it'll be even worse than it is now.
Well, my dear friend Thomas Naylor, may he rest in peace, he started, wonderful man. He was a professor emeritus at Duke University. He's really a brilliant guy. He started the Second Vermont Republic back in early 2000s. He passed away in 2012. My life hasn't been the same since he passed on. And he was fighting for secessionism. And it was starting to really gain momentum. And that's what we really need in some ways. But again, if we don't do something now, we're finished.
Yes. You mentioned Vermont. It's very interesting. When Vermont and Texas joined the Union, obviously when every state joins the Union, there's legislation setting forth in writing the terms under which it joins. Vermont and Texas insisted upon and got from the Congress the right to leave. Texas got the right to leave or to stay and break up into 5 states.
Wow.
Imagine 10 libertarian senators coming from Texas to Washington, D.C. would drive Chuck Schumer and that crowd crazy. Well, then, of course, unless they're Thomas Massey or Ron Paul, they're going to get co-opted and seduced by the power that's there. The only remedy is secession and nullification, leaving the government or basically saying this law doesn't apply here because we don't consent to it and you violated the Constitution. Texas did that with abortion and the Supreme Court let them do it.
Yeah, the state, yeah. You know, the other thing, too, as you mentioned, they get sold out. As I say, that it's not the government anymore. It's a crime syndicate.
Yes.
The banksters, look at, they're too big to fail. After they ruin everybody, all the subprime mortgages, all the dirty deals that they do. Look at that little lowlife J.P. Morgan Chase, rigging the precious metals market. Convicted of fraud 5 times. Slap on the wrist, but prosecution to the fullest for us, the little people of Slavelandia.
Right.
Number 2, drug dealers are running the country. Morons and imbeciles call them Big Pharma.
Yes.
Number 3, the military-industrial complex. You don't have to believe me. Dwight D. Eisenhower, 5-star General, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces.
Yes.
2-term Republican president, warning us on January 17th, 1961, that the military-industrial complex is robbing the nation of the genius of the scientists, threat of the labors, and the future of the children. And number 4 now, big tech. I will tell you what you can say. I will tell you what you can do. I am in charge.
That's the America that we have today. It didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly and inexorably. The government is a criminal gang that just calls itself the government.
You got it.
Secession, ignoring the government, or another Berlin Wall. I speak metaphorically.
Yep.
I'm not advocating violence.
That's mine.
I am advocating civil disobedience.
Oh, wait, yeah, it's not. I would call it civil obedience. Yeah, we're obedient. They are disobedient. These little lowlives that are robbing us of our freedom, peace, and justice. Look, you mentioned the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Happiness has become a dirty word.
Yes, yes. So why aren't there more Thomas Masseys or Ron Pauls in the government? Because these people that get in there, Congressman Massey, former Congressman Paul are the exceptions, get seduced by power. They love to tell other people how to live. Even conservative Republicans, even Reaganites, love to tell other people how to live. And when they tell you and me and the people watching and listening to us now how to live, they're no better than Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. It's just a different lifestyle that they're commanding. But they're usurping our liberty. They're taking our property and telling us what to do with it. We never authorized that. The Constitution has become a joke. It exists on paper, but as an instrument to restrain the government, it has been a dismal, abominable, unconditional failure.
Hey, yep. You know, you said they want us to, we have to follow their orders. We have to do what they want us to do. We can't be ourselves.
Right.
You know, when I was a little kid, my father, may his soul rest in peace, you get in a fight with your father. He said to me, "You little bastard, you think I'm telling you what I'm telling you because I want you to be like me? I want you to become yourself." That's prohibited now.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to be yourself. You will do what I tell you to do.
Right, right. That's where we are, my dear friend. So you and I have to keep talking, and many, many other people have to keep talking, and the people that watch and listen to us and that like our words have to keep writing and talking among themselves. The people that brought down the Berlin Wall were not the academics and the intellectuals. They were the ordinary, everyday Germans. There were a lot of Americans there, Germans who had had enough. And the almighty Soviet Union and the German East German Stasi couldn't stop them.
That's right. And that's what we have to do. We have to unite. Thank you very much, Judge Andrew Napolitano.
Thank you very
Napolitano.
much, my mentor, Gerald Salenti. What a pleasure. All the best to you.
Okay, we'll be back soon.
You
Thank
got
you
it.
for tuning in, everyone.
This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello, Robert. Hello, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today we have a special guest, like we always do have special guests. He is a longtime favorite of mine personally. It's the first time I've been face-to-face or Zoom-to-Zoom with him. And he has a lot of fans here on Rich Dad. And so it's really nice to have Gerald Salenti here. He's the founder, director of the Trends Research Institute, and publisher of the weekly Trends Journal magazine, which I highly recommend everybody get. And the reason I love Gerald so much is you don't have to worry where he's at. You know, he will tell you, he doesn't sit on the fence. He will tell you exactly where he's at. He reads the trends. He tells you exactly where it's at for him. So it's going to be an exciting show, and our discussion today will be: inflation is real, or is it real? I mean, that's a big discussion I'm listening to all the time right now. Some people say it's real, and some people say it's going to deflation. So that's kind of a very important discussion. Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to talking with